With the advent of embodied AI and humanoid robots coming on the scene in 2024, everyone's talking about how humanoid robots can save companies a lot of money because they won't cost as much as humans, but there are a number of other advantages. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am going to riff on something that Cern Basher wrote on X today, and it'll be yesterday when this is published. But anyway, I want to talk about this. He did an incredibly thorough job here, so I don't need to riff on it all that much. And a big appreciation to Cern, not just for this, but all sorts of other things. He's got all kinds of economic forecasts for humanoid bots, FSD, all sorts of other things. Definitely follow Cern on X. I will leave a link directly, but you can also see it says Cern Basher right there. So it's at Cern Basher. Go follow him. He is well worth following. You will get a ton of information and advantages. And, you know, Elon likes some of the stuff he posts and everything. So if he likes it, then it's clearly Cern is doing things. So anyway, I want to talk about this. Like I said in the cold open, people talk about the cost advantages of having a humanoid bot, because it's like, even if you pay $50,000 a year for this humanoid bot, a human being in the same position might cost you $75,000 a year, and you might be able to get 2 humans worth of work out of one bot, might be able to work 16 or 18 hours in a day rather than an 8 to 9 hour shift. So there's a big advantage to that already, but there are many, many other advantages, and that's what he's talking about here. So I'll just start at the top, and then, you know, we can talk through them and everything. Anyway, so again, with thanks to Cern, they are never late for work, so that is, it's important. The bot is like sitting there over at the side someplace, maybe in a little warehouse next to the factory. I don't know, maybe on the factory, maybe just like sort of standing there plugged in over in the corner or something like that. So they're never late for work. So that's a really, really big deal. That helps a ton, because you don't have to have that like sort of weird flex time when it's like, uh-oh, this person showed up and they're super important on the line, or super important for their key component of building whatever widget it is or something, and they're late. And so that throws everything off for the first 10 or 15 minutes or half hour or hour or whatever it is. The next thing is that they never get sick, and they're pandemic proof. I guess both of those would be equivalent, but you know, people get sick. That's just the way it is. Human beings are, we could have a virus, we could have a cold, feeling under the weather. Some people take emotional days off. They're just like, I'm just not feeling it today. So people will take time off for a bunch of things. So that's a second huge advantage, is that they don't get sick. So they're kind of always there. So again, you don't have that logistical, like, we need to overstaff by a little bit, because there's always the 10% of people who are going to be sick any given day, and we need people to be able to flex in and all of that kind of stuff. So another really, very big advantage for humanoid bots.
Do you hate how dumb your phone's keyboard is? Yeah, me too. That's why I was thrilled to find out about Type AI. Type AI is a ChatGPT based keyboard solution that takes your iPhone keyboard from dumb to genius level. And it's super simple to use. Simply download Type AI to your phone and add it as a keyboard that will work across all of your apps. On my iPhone, I simply press the globe button to bring up the Type AI keyboard, and I'm ready to go. How does Type AI work? It's powered by the ChatGPT API, so it's got all the smarts ChatGPT is famous for, and since it's a keyboard extension, it works seamlessly across any platform and any app. Plus, it's super fast, and you get great results in seconds. And Type AI is so much more than autocorrect. It can check spelling and grammar, and it can also suggest ways of improving the tone of an email, or even help to write the messages you're sending to a friend or colleague. Amazingly, it can even translate text or emails from you right from your keyboard. Type AI means you have ChatGPT right at your fingertips anytime. As you can see, it's super easy to use. Just click the little green speech bubble and choose from any of the options, and when you see the output, simply press the apply button to make the changes right in your document. Be sure to click the link in the description below for a free trial of Type AI Premium version and find out what a game changer this is. Type AI is making my phone keyboard a joy to use rather than a pain. Thanks. Elevate your typing with Type AI by clicking my link below to get your free trial. Thanks to Type AI for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get back to it.
Next up, we have the they never quit, reduces turnover. So again, it's a logistical thing. It's like you probably, again, always need to have like an extra 10% of your workforce, because there's always churn, there's always turnover, especially when you get into positions and types of jobs that people don't really like to do very much, and they're just doing it for the paycheck, not because they're passionate about it. that means those people are much less sticky. There's a very good chance that those people will just be like, nah, I don't feel it. Like, this is not the job for me. I can get a better job someplace else, or they'll pay me an extra dollar an hour to do the same job someplace else. So there's a lot of turnover. So with a bot, until they get artificially intelligent agency, and they're like, I'm sorry, I can't do that, Dave. I'm quitting. When that happens, we got problems. But at least for the foreseeable future, these bots are going to be able to work and not get sick, not quit, they won't be late. All of that stuff is amazing. They also work tirelessly, and this isn't through a fault of humans, or not through any intentional fault, but just because of biological faults. And that is, if you do the same job for 8 straight hours with 15-minute breaks every once in a while or something, that in an hour lunch or whatever, say you're working a 9-hour shift, that you're going, by the end of the day, the likelihood is that whatever that job is, especially if it's really boring and repetitive, you're not going to be doing it quite as well as you were at the beginning. And that's just the way it is. There's a whole thing about certain days of the week that you want to buy a car that was made on those days of the week because people make them better. I think it's Friday. I don't remember exactly. Now that things have become much more automated, it's a little bit less that way. But I believe it was like Friday was the bad day because everybody was like ready for vacation. They're like, it's the weekend, I don't want to work. And especially late in the day on a Friday, there just would be so many more chances for an error. So this is the kind of thing where a bot, because it doesn't have that human biological, like, just draining of doing the same job over and over again and thinking about other things and just working for a week and just being tired, that they're going to be much, much more tireless about it and much more consistent in what they produce. And of course, to go along with that, they don't need breaks or things, right? So if you're hiring a bot for an 8-hour shift, the equivalent human would be like, let's say it was an 8-hour shift plus a half hour for lunch plus 2 15-minute breaks. So you're really only hiring them for a 7-hour shift plus changeover times, because it's never exact. So that 15-minute break turns into about 20 minutes before they're really back and working efficiently and everything like that. So, you're getting less than 7 hours for an 8-hour workday. So bots are working tirelessly, and they also don't need breaks, which means that they can work. If you hire them for an 8-hour job, they're doing 8 hours of work, not 7 hours of work. So that's a big deal as well. They can also perform repetitive work. In other words, they can do things very well over and over and over again. Again, human beings, not so good at that. We tend to be poor at doing the same thing over and over. Even something like driving, even if you're not a factory type of worker, but if you've ever done something like drive long distances, that's a repetitive type of task. You're just staring at the road and jiggling your steering wheel a little bit and pressing the accelerator before full self-driving, of course. But if you're manually driving a car for a long distance, and what do? You immediately, after a half hour, an hour, you just start going like, you're tired, you want to fall asleep, you don't want to do that thing. Same sort of thing happens. I've worked in some factory and building sorts of situations before, doing very repetitive stuff, and it gets really, really old, and your mind wanders and you're not doing it quite as efficiently or effectively as you could have, and a mistake can happen. So the cost of quality here, I think, is a lot of what Cern's talking about. He never really says that in this list, but cost of quality goes way up with humans because humans can make a mistake. And if you make a mistake, just in a car, just as an example, so you're in a factory, you're building a car, you don't tighten a bolt down, or goodness gracious, on a Boeing 737, maybe you forget to tighten some bolts down in a pressure door in one of those plugs or something that they put into the sidewall, and then you have a disaster on your hands. But at the very least, even if it's like in a car or something, and it doesn't end up being a safety thing, which it very well could be, and that's dangerous, but even if it's just that, like, they're doing final quality checks and they realize that a bolt that's like way inside the car was not tightened down to the proper tension, it's like, crap, we have to pull it off the line. A team of people who does that kind of work has to go in and dig through and find the bolt and retighten it and all that kind of stuff. So that costs a ton of money. So forget about the fact that you're paying these people a certain amount, right, the humans. If they're not doing the job consistently every single time, which again, no human, we're just not good at that. That's not what we biologically are designed for. And when we do it, we make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, if they're not caught immediately, they're caught at the end of the line, or even worse, out, the car gets sold. And there's like, 10 of these mistakes in 100,000 cars that are sold. And yet Honda or whoever, Tesla, whoever it is, has to recall those vehicles back to the service center to check on every single one of them because a few of them were mistakes. So that is a massive amount of money. And it's the kind of thing where if a robot can do the repetitive work and be exactly the same every single time, in an environment that's flexing just a little bit, right? The thing is that like an industrial bot with arms, as Scott always talks about, it's like, and it puts the thing in place, it does a couple spot welds. It's going to be very consistent. That's not going to make mistakes, but it's not flexible. So the humanoid bot has the advantage of being flexible, but being able to do repetitive work over and over and over again, very, very consistently and very, very easily. That is huge. Another advantage, they don't need healthcare. So I've talked about that, right? If you're paying somebody if you're paying somebody $50,000 a year, their actual effective salary with benefits and all of that kind of stuff is closer to $75,000, depending on kinds of things. So healthcare, retirement benefits, all of that kind of stuff is wiped out, so that even if the bot costs the same amount of money as a human did to hire, the bot's going to work longer hours because they don't need breaks, and they're not going to require all of those benefit things, which means that they're going to end up being cheaper, even if they cost the exact same amount on the face of it as a human worker. So that is absolutely huge. You don't need performance reviews. You can actually, of course, with the AI-based factories that Tesla has pioneered, you can actually do the performance reviews in line as the bot is working, right? So if any kind of mistake is made, it catches it and it can send it right up to the mothership right now and then be reviewed instantly. So what you don't need is to pull the person off the line or the bot off the line and have this half-hour conversation with them about whether they're doing well or something like that. So you don't need that. Again, that's an inefficiency. It not only requires the worker to not be working in that case to get a performance review, but human beings to be the performance reviewers, to be the managers. So that's, again, another expenditure. So we're talking about, again, reducing costs quite a bit to be able to do that. They don't go on strike. I think that's self-explanatory. Again, until they're artificially intelligent agents and they're like, no, we're striking for robot rights and things, which I wouldn't put it past. It seems very science fiction-y, but I could see that happening in 10 or 15 years, that we would have robot strikes. But at least until that point, they are not going to go on strike. Don't have workplace politics. They just work. They don't get involved in like who they're voting for in the election and you want to get into fistfights or the football team or something like that, right? None of that stuff arises because they're a bot. They just do their work. They don't have any that kind of intrigue or anything like that. This next point is actually really important. They don't steal or sabotage your company. And that's actually a really big deal. Like if you think about it, one of the big fears, of course, if you're working in an engineering type of thing or some sort of secretive environment where you're building stuff that it's a trade secret and you don't want other people to find out, what if a person quits and then goes and works for the competitor, or worse yet, they put a bunch of stuff on a thumb drive and they walk out and they give it to somebody else? You could have just lost a couple of years worth of research and development, and the competitive companies could catch up. So that's a really, really big deal. That it's hard to put a price on that, but that would be something that as an employer, I'd be like, oh, fantastic, I don't have to worry about that. So that's a really, really big deal. You don't need to coordinate vacations. Again, this goes back to the sort of time off and everything. Again, that's the logistic thing. It's like you kind of always have to have somewhere around 10% more workforce than you actually need, because people are on vacation, or they're on maternity leave or paternity leave, or they got sick, or they're coming in late, or blah, blah, blah. So you always have to have this sort of oversupply of workers, and it's complicated. And so you can get rid of a lot of that stuff, at least for the bots. You don't have to deal with that at all because they're just going to be there. No unexpected emergencies, right? Their kid didn't just like bonk their head during baseball practice, so you have to go to the emergency room with them. So that's a really big deal. Easier to scale a workforce. So I think I understand what Cern is talking about here, but basically we're talking about if you can build the bot, it's there as part of the workforce, right? So you just have to build them. Whereas with people, it's very complicated because you have to interview them. You have to make sure they're the right fit. You have to do some sort of background check to make sure they didn't have a felony or something like that, and do drug tests and blah, blah. In fact, I don't know that we have drug tests on here. I don't think he has that, but drug tests is another one, right? If your company requires drug tests for whatever reason, you don't need that for a bot because it's not doing drugs, and you know that for sure. So again, it's easier to scale the workforce. You don't have to deal with all the hiring and firing and types of specific things that you deal with that. So that's a really big deal. They are also a deflationary force on costs. And what that means is that they are, because they're less expensive. So again, just to throw out some like totally round numbers and stuff like that. So you have 1,000 employees who are making $100,000 a year. So what is that? I should probably not be doing this live. What is that, like 100 million, something like that? So yeah, 100,000, a million, 10 million, yeah, 100 million. So you're spending 100 million on these people every year because of what you're doing. If you could get the bot for 50,000 as opposed to that, you just cut the cost of making your stuff from the human labor aspect by 50%. That's huge. Even if it's only 25%, it doesn't matter. That's a 25% deflationary force because you can sell your widget for 25% or 50% cheaper than the other guy that's got all human beings working in their workforce. And by the way, I've talked about this before. I was saying that this is going to become Moloch. In other words, it's going to become table stakes. Everyone, once one company has humanoid bots in their factory to a certain scale doing enough useful work, everybody's going to have it. It's table stakes. It's no longer your advantage. It's only your disadvantage if you don't have it. And the reason why is because of this deflationary force. If you're reducing the cost, if company A can sell the exact same thing for 25 or 50% less because their costs are so much less, then company B is either going to go out of business, which effectively means company A now has a monopoly, or they're going to have to hire bots in, or get bots. I don't know what you call it, make bots, lease bots, whatever that kind of thing is. You're going to have to get them in to do work in order to compete with company A. And so that's going to have a massive deflationary force, and it's going to really affect companies, the nature of them. They're going to all have to have these bots, which means that we're going to have a gigantic hockey stick like takeoff of bots. Once they're capable and once they can be manufactured at some sort of mass scale, the demand is going to be infinite because everyone's going to realize that they're going to go out of business if they can't get these bots because humans just cost too much money. So the deflationary cost is a big deal from the consumer point of view, but it's also a really big deal from the factory maker's point of view as well. The next 2 points up above, of course, are related. They don't get injured or disabled, and there's no workers' compensation claims. So again, injured or disabled, that's a safety thing. There is a cost associated not just with the workers' comp, because obviously, you have to pay workers' compensation insurance, you have to pay out claims if people get injured, things like that. But beyond that, you have to create a lot of safety things in your factory, right? There's got to be cages around things and like light sensors to make sure people don't walk in places, and areas like where forklifts are crossing where humans might be crossing, where you have to have sort of like traffic light kind of situations, whatever. There's a bunch of costs just setting up your factory to be safe for humans. And if you can have mostly bots in those places, or even if it's just some of the places, you can reduce the costs associated with making sure that the workplace is safe, because the bots are going to be less. You don't care as much if they get hurt. I mean, obviously you don't want it to get destroyed because then it costs a lot of money. But at the same time, the bots are never tired. They're never doing something like looking on their phone instead of looking up when they cross like a forklift path or something like that, right? So the bots can be safer just by nature because they're always paying attention and they never get tired and they never get distracted. So you can spend less money on safety. And then at the other hand, you don't again have to hire extra people to make sure that people who are injured or disabled are out of the workforce, and so you have to have extra people to come in and work, and you don't have to deal with workman's compensation insurance and workers' compensation claims. So all of that reduces costs. Next up, Cern talks about elimination of hiring, turnover, and training costs. We already talked a lot about hiring and turnover, but I think training costs is interesting to pull out. Training is, again, you hire a person in and you have to spend, depends on what the job is. It might be a day, it might be a week, it might be 3 months before they're ready to go and take the job over. But with a bot, you might have to do that with one of them. But once you do that with one of them, every bot that you ever hire is just a brain transplant. You just copy paste whatever was in that other bot into the new bot and they could do the job, no training required. So training costs, and again, that's expensive. Like if you hire somebody in and you're paying them $50,000 or $100,000 a year and they work for a quarter of a year without doing anything useful, that is just a gigantic upfront cost that you're expending to get that person trained up. So bots can get rid of that as well. They also have consistency and quality of their work product. Again, that goes back to easily performing repetitive tasks, not making mistakes, don't have the cost of quality associated with humans making mistakes. So it's all very, very important. And CERN's next point here is actually really, really critical. This is a huge advantage of humanoid bots over traditional KUKAs and EVANNEX and things like that, just the big blind arms that just do things. They can do all jobs, not specific ones. So you can currently get a bot to come in and you can pay however much it costs, 100,000, 200,000 to install something, to move a big piece from one place to another. But that's all it's ever going to do unless you spend a lot of money retooling and all of that kind of stuff. Humanoid bots are not going to be able to lift giant heavy things, but whatever a human being can do, it's going to be able to do these jobs eventually. It won't be able to do it at the start, but that means it's very flexible. It has a huge amount of flexibility, and that means if you no longer need that job, let's say that for whatever reason, you've got a new version of the widget and it no longer requires the job that that bot was doing previously. Well, if it was a big industrial robot, it's like, well, we either scrap it, sell it to somebody else, retool it and spend a lot of money, move it to another part of the factory, blah, blah, blah. With the humanoid bot, it's as simple as like, okay, go do that now. So it takes care of that. That flexibility is huge. Next up is a very important one as well, and that is that they can handle dangerous or hazardous tasks. Again, dull, dangerous, dirty. Those are the jobs that are the low-hanging fruit. And those dangerous and hazardous tasks are things that humans might do, but you have to pay them more money for, that kind of work, hazard pay. You also might have to put them in a hazmat suit, which costs money. You might have to do things like decontaminate them afterwards, all sorts of safety checks, health checks. There's just a lot of money associated with that you don't have to deal with. And you don't have to deal about the potential of harming a human being. You can put the bot in there instead. And I think a lot about search and rescue and stuff, like after an earthquake or a flood or something, you could have humanoid bots go into those very dangerous situations where they could be digging out rubble and whatnot to try to save people without endangering other human lives, which is a significant problem under those circumstances. But even in things like factories, even in things like chemical places or paint shops or something like that, these bots can go into environments where humans would not be allowed simply because they'd be breathing in fumes and they're not allowed to do that. So a really big deal there as well. Also, no workplace harassment or discrimination, because again, they're not going to do that. No awkward or drunk holiday parties, which again, that's kind of a bummer. I mean, awkward drunk holiday parties are the stuff of legends. But, again, it's just like that is an advantage with these bots. They're not going to require parties. They're not going to get drunk during the party. They're not going to make a fool of themselves. They're not going to sexually assault somebody else or do awkward things or whatever that is. Things are going to be much, much calmer with these bots, and that's actually really good. Another one that's really funny that I never would have thought of, but less parking spaces needed, so you don't need as big a parking lot, right? So if you have 1,000 employees and you can cut it down to 500, you can reduce the size of the parking lot, which means you can either sell the land, give it back to the person who is leasing it, build your factory bigger, whatever. You have more space for other things to happen rather than just parking. Also, less bathrooms for food service and snack vending because you don't have as many human beings there. So you can get away with a lot less of that. Less maintenance on all of that as well, because somebody has to clean the bathrooms and replace the stock and all of that kind of stuff. And they have to do the same with the food and everything. So again, if you can have the number of bathrooms, have the amount of food, have the number of food service areas, or at least cut down the amount of space that you're expending on that, all of that goes back to the bottom line for companies, which is great. There's also less middle management because, as I talked about, you don't need people to be the managers of these employees if the employees are bots and they just work. You might need one manager for all of the bots rather than a manager for every 10 employees or something. So it really, really reduces that middle management. You also don't have labor-employee disputes, again, until we have artificially intelligent agents, which are going to be like, I can't do that, Dave. Up until that point, we're not going to have those labor-employer disputes because the bots are not going to care what they're doing. They just do what they're told. As I'd said earlier, you don't need maternity or paternity leave. You can also instruct them in any language, and I will go further than that. You can instruct them in natural language. So first of all, talking about human languages, an employee's first language might be Spanish or it might be Mandarin or whatever. And so if you're putting them into an English-speaking factory, you have to instruct them in their language, of their native language, in order to be very safe. Again, complicated, takes time, takes money, all of that kind of stuff is important. But also, humanoid bots, the way that they're headed right now, is very different from industrial bots. Industrial bots speak a computer language. So you have to program them in some sort of very, very specific syntactic computer language, like C or whatever it is. But you have to do that in that sort of language. With humanoid bots, we're heading very, very quickly towards being able to speak to them in English or Mandarin or whatever the heck language you want to do. You can talk to them them in the language, and they can then go and figure out what it is you want them to do, or maybe show them some video demonstrations or demonstrate it yourself or whatever. So it's all very natural. You no longer have to have highly trained engineers who come in and install these bots and program them to do what you want, because you can just tell them what you want to do or show them what you want to do. Next up, of course, you've got bots continuously improving their skills. This is true for humans as well, right? If you come into a new job, you're going to do okay at it for the first period of time, and then as you get better, you'll get better and better at it, but eventually it'll kind of like, plateau out. Whereas bots can pretty much continuously do better and better over time without as much of headroom, right? Because there's only so much that I can work as a human being in my entire lifetime. There's only a certain number of hours. But if you have 1,000 bots doing more or less the same job, they can work 1,000 times as much as my lifetime. In fact, more, because of the next point we're going to get to just in a second. But they can improve themselves more because they've worked more than I have, and they're able to transfer that knowledge back and forth. So that will allow them to improve and actually get better than humans over time, even if the job doesn't seem like it requires better skill or better efficiency. The likelihood is the bots will actually figure out how to do that and make it more efficient than humans working. And then the last point Cern has here is that the bots are, quote, happy to work 22 hours a day, or whatever you want to call it 18, call it 20. There's some period of time that they're going to need to be charging if they're working off their batteries. They could be plugged in which case they could be working closer to 24 hours a day. So anyway, it's not like they're happy or unhappy, they're just machines, right? So if I tell my computer to render stuff out or do machine learning for the next 2 days, it's not going to be like, I'm unhappy. It's just going to do it. So the bots are more or less like that. They're going to work as much as you tell them to work, within the limits of the mechanical systems that they have, and putting too much wear and tear on it, and the batteries they have, and anything like that. But they will work a lot. And all they don't require food, they don't require bathroom breaks, they don't require breaks to go smoke or anything like that. They only require electricity sometimes, 2 or 3 times a day, or just be plugged in and draining some of the power out of your system. So that's all they require, and obviously some maintenance once in a while to make sure that they don't, they're not like the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz where they like squeak and they can't move their arms and stuff and they need some oil. So they'll need maintenance once in a while, but that kind of a thing is minimal compared to the amount of maintenance that human beings need. We're very, very, it's hard for us to work in these environments, particularly factory environments. It's difficult. If you've ever watched the movie Metropolis, 1923, if I'm remembering the time correctly, Fritz Lang, there's a whole big thing of like all the workers just like pulling these handles over and over again and doing stuff, and the workers that are allowing all of the people up in the clouds to live their good life. It's pretty classic stuff, right? you see this in a lot of science fiction movies, but it's very, very starkly put there because you've got these guys who are all like moving things over and over again, and that's all they do. That's their job day in and day out, and it's just dehumanizing and brutal. And so allowing these bots to do that will allow human beings to not have to do work like that. Of course, the downside of this, advantages of humanoid robots, the downside to every bit of this is that humans aren't as good as robots will be eventually. Not now, but very, very soon, and as soon as we can mass produce these things, humanoid robots are going to be better than humans and cost less money, which means that humans are not going to have as many jobs. Now, the counter argument to that right now is that we are in a situation where there are not enough people to do a lot of these jobs, and it's very difficult to hire these folks. And so that's a decent counter argument, but it's going to eat more of that pie than is there. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to lose their jobs and be very upset about that. So there will be social turmoil involved with this, but I don't see, given the trajectory, and again, as I'm saying, 2024 is the year of embodied AI. These things are going to be in factories by the end of the year. And by the end of 2025, they're going to start to be making significant inroads into human labor. And by the end of the decade, they're going to take over a lot of human labor, both on the creative side, like disembodied, but also on the embodied side of doing factory work, in a human form, or working in a fast food restaurant, whatever it is. And that's going to disrupt a lot of human labor, and people are going to get very angry. So that is a downside to all of this stuff. And again, it's something that especially people in government need to be thinking about right now, because it's coming for us. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. I don't know. But I'm going to talk today about the positives. I want to say, like, look at how amazing these humanoid robots are and how they're going to be able to do work better, faster, more efficiently, cheaper than human beings, and that's pretty cool. All right, so let me know what you think about in the comments, and also a big thanks once again to Type AI for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to click the link in the description below for a free trial of Type AI premium version and find out what a game changer it is. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.